Freight Association's Gavin Kelly. Gavin, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. Exorbitant fuel price increases are upon us. How do you think this is going to affect the operations?
Good evening, Coley, and good evening to all your viewers. At least I've got some good news. Just looking at the stats on the screen on the wall next to me, I can see that oil's at $98 a barrel at the moment, 98.64. And the rand has actually improved a little bit, believe it or not. So a little bit of silver lining in that cloud, but they're not the sorts of prices, either the Brent crude price or the strength of the rand against the dollar that we really want. If we could have 1 rand to a dollar, I think we'd all be happy. But we're far away from that for quite some time. It means that fuel at the pump is going to be more expensive. There have been some horror forecasts for April of 8 rand a litre. I don't think we're going to get there yet. It doesn't look like it. We've got a couple of weeks to go. Probably 3 to 4 rand is what we're looking at. That's the under recovery at the moment, but obviously that's fluctuating as we go along. Yeah,
well, there are a number of factors to take into account before we get to that month of April. So one of those is a comment from someone who effectively, whatever he says, clearly affects the price and indeed the way the world works. Donald Trump says this is a small price to pay. This pain, we can take it now, but in the end, it probably is going to be for a good cause. But here is where I'm going, Gavin. The oil price, if it does continue to surge, combine that with the weakening rand and the increase in the fuel price levy, motorists are really going to start feeling the pain at the pump. Again, I ask you the question, do we have plans to try and absorb this pain? Are you talking to institutions such as the Central Energy Fund, for example?
Well, we haven't been chatting to them recently. We chatted to them, I think, last time this happened when we had that incident with Ukraine, if you can all remember, and oil went to $100 a barrel. We have said a couple of things to a number of people. For example, one of the things we'd like to understand is why isn't Sasol, that's our own homegrown entity that produces fuel from coal, why isn't that helping us, cushioning us from these sorts of increases? I'm sure we could have some sort of a process, either in diluting, well, not diluting, mixing fuel, or bringing down the cost of that fuel, subsidizing what they're getting into the fuel price to bring that down. The real problem is that we just don't seem to have alternatives as a country. We just don't seem to have that. And no, the Central Energy Fund at this stage has not in any way voiced or stated that they're going to look at freezing those tariffs or those taxes on fuel.
Yeah. For commercial transporters like yourselves, Gavin, how do you handle such fluctuations? Because at least on the horizon, things are about to get really bad, but we're going to have to wait until we get there before we really try to ramp this up.
Well, there are a number of ways, clearly, that transporters try and deal with this. So some of them cost more money, unfortunately, because it's technology. And other ways is to look at the way in which you run your routes, when you run your routes, and how you run your routes. So to explain that to your viewers, what you've got to do, the base that you've got to do, is you've got to bring down the amount of fuel that you consume as a company. And there are various ways of doing that. The one way is obviously to stop routes that are not sustainable for you, routes that are not actually viable for you. The second is then to look at these routes and to drive at different times of the day. When things like traffic is high, you don't want to be in the traffic, you don't want to stand in congestion and idle. Then you look at how you actually deliver to your customers. Just because your first customers are around the corner, is that the first one you should go to? Should you not go to the furthest one? And I'm simplifying the examples, to the furthest one and use a different route back. Then you look at the vehicles you're using. You know, South Africans always like to have the biggest cell phone and the fastest car and the biggest truck. Is that really what I need to do this job? Can I not downgrade? Can I not downsize, use a different vehicle to do the job? So those are the various types of things you look at. The maintenance of the vehicle. Is it using fuel optimally? So in other words, make sure they are well maintained. So those are the types of things you can do. Obviously, you can also go to your customer and say, well, you see what's happening. You know where we are. I need an increase in the rate that I charge. That's not always so easy.
And that point, Gavin, the one that you mentioned last, I hope that it is the last option, because the question was going to be, at which point do you pass on this pain at the pump to the normal consumer? Is that a last resort, or do you factor it in as part of managing the costs in between?
That's a very good question, Collie. And there are some transporters who pass it on immediately. They've got absolutely no other avenue than to do that. Otherwise, they would close as a business. And quite often, it's not always only, but quite often, it's the small operators, the guys who don't have any sort of cash reserve really to speak of. But generally, transporters try and negotiate. Sometimes what they try and do is say, well, give me a percentage of the increase. So just for argument's sake, it went up by 65 cents, the price of diesel last month. Give me 10 cents, not the full 65 cents, and I can perhaps continue the operations, and I'll put some money of my own in. So the idea is not to immediately hit the retail, the till, the man in the street, the consumer. But as I say, it depends very much on the operation that you have.
Gavin Kelly, thank you very much indeed for your time and insights. He is the CEO of the Road Freight Association. Hopefully, things are going to get better.